The night was dressed in luxury. Golden lights poured down from chandeliers that seemed to float in the air, and every polished surface reflected the lives of people who had never known what it meant to struggle. Inside the Royal Crest Hotel, the air smelled of money, perfume, and perfection, everything carefully designed to make the rich forget that pain even existed. Among them moved a woman in a plain black uniform, her posture quiet, her presence unnoticed. Her name was Tina. To others, she was invisible. Another waitress weaving between tables, carrying silver trays and forced smiles. But behind those tired eyes lived a storm. She had once been a woman who dreamed, a woman who loved, a woman who believed that love was enough. Years ago, Tina's world was small but full, a one-room apartment with a cracked window and a broken stove. But laughter filled its corners. Back then, she had someone beside her, a man who made promises under candlelight when they had no electricity. His name was Samuel Mark. He wasn't rich, not even close, but his words were richer than gold. His dreams larger than the city they lived in. He used to tell her that one day they would have everything. A house, a car, a life that people would envy. Tina believed him. She worked double shifts while he tried to start a business that always seemed one step away from failure, yet she never complained. She believed in his fire, in his ambition, in the love that held them together through sleepless nights and empty dinners. But time has a way of testing love. Success came slowly, then suddenly. One deal turned into another. One investor turned into a dozen, and soon Samuel had less time to laugh, less time to love. He began wearing suits instead of sweaters, talking about profit instead of passion. Tina tried to keep up, but she could feel him slipping away piece by piece. The day he left, he didn't take much. Just his suitcase and the version of himself that no longer needed her. He said he was chasing something bigger, something brighter. She never stopped him. She just stood by the door, holding the last pieces of her heart, watching the man she built walk away without looking back. Life went on, but slower, emptier. The city grew louder while her world grew small. She changed jobs, faces, cities, but pain has a way of finding you no matter where you go. Years turned her tears into silence, and silence into strength. She stopped expecting kindness. She stopped expecting love. Now, in the glittering chaos of the Royal Crest, Tina had learned the art of invisibility. She moved like a shadow, polite, efficient, unseen. People barely noticed her, and that was a strange kind of peace. Until that night. The elevator doors opened, and the room shifted, as if the air itself recognized someone powerful had entered. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, his every movement polished with the confidence that only wealth could buy. The crowd's attention followed him like gravity follows the earth. Cameras flashed. Whispers began. Samuel Mark, the billionaire investor, the man whose empire stretched across continents. Tina froze, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. For a second, she thought her mind was playing cruel tricks. But no, it was him. The same face she once traced with trembling fingers. The same man she had tried to forget every day for 10 long years. His hair was grayer now, his presence heavier. Beside him walked a woman, elegant, young, beautiful, her laughter soft and shallow. Tina's heart began to race, but she swallowed hard and forced herself to keep moving. It was just another night, another guest. She told herself he wouldn't notice her. People like him never look down anymore. But fate, it seems, doesn't forget. As she approached his table, the soft glow of the chandelier spilled over her face. Samuel was laughing, raising his glass, basking in his own glory, until his eyes met hers. And in that one single moment, time shattered. The glass in his hand stopped midair. The laughter around him became a distant echo. His eyes, the same eyes that once held her dreams, widened in disbelief. She could see the confusion, the recognition, the guilt crawling slowly across his expression. For him, it must have felt like a ghost had returned from the past. A reminder that no empire is tall enough to hide from memory. Tina looked away quickly, pretending to focus on her work. But her hands betrayed her, trembling as she set down the plates. The scent of expensive perfume burned her throat. Every sound in the hall became distant. She could hear only the wild beating of her heart. The rush of memories crashing like waves. The man who once shared her hunger now feasted among kings. The man who once held her hand under a broken roof now owned towers that kissed the sky, and she was nothing but a shadow in his perfect world. For a brief moment, she thought he might call her name, but he didn't. Instead, he looked away, and perhaps out of pride or maybe shame. But that small, silent rejection felt heavier than words. Tina turned and walked toward the kitchen, her steps slow, her heart screaming. The hallway lights blurred as tears gathered in her eyes. She had promised herself she was over him. But seeing him again, happy, successful, untouched, broke something she didn't know was still fragile. In the quiet of the staff room, she sat down, her hands covering her face. The noise of the hotel faded into the background as she tried to breathe. The years of pretending to be strong suddenly felt useless. Everything she had buried was alive again, raw, aching, burning. Outside, the night grew colder. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with laughter and music. But somewhere between those walls stood a woman who had once been everything to a man who now had everything except her. And though she didn't know it yet, that night was only the beginning. Fate had not brought them together to remember the past. It had brought them together to finish what the past had left undone. Because some stories don't end when love breaks. They end when destiny decides it's time for two broken hearts to face each other once more. The world outside the hotel glowed with the usual city rhythm. Cars moving like silver veins through the night, neon lights flickering in the misty air. But inside the Royal Crest, something had changed. The balance between past and present trembled quietly between two souls who once shared everything, and now shared only a memory they both wished to forget. Tina tried to lose herself in her work, clinging to the motions of routine. Tray up, tray down, smile, nod, walk away. But no rhythm could drown out the thunder in her chest. She could feel his presence across the hall, like a weight pressing against her every breath. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the tension of what once was. Samuel Mark, the name that once meant love, now echoed like a haunting. Every laugh that came from his table felt like a cut she couldn't see but could feel deep beneath her skin. His voice, though she tried not to hear it, carried a tone that wasn't joy but defense. The laughter of a man who tried to appear complete while knowing something essential had long been missing. For years, Tina had built walls around her memories. She had painted over them with work, with exhaustion, with silence. But seeing him again was like someone had torn through the foundation. Every wall crumbled, every scar reopened. She moved like a ghost among people who would never understand. None of them knew that the man at table 9, the billionaire who signed million-dollar deals with a smile, had once broken a promise that no money could repair. None of them knew that the waitress quietly serving him used to be his home. In her mind, flashes of their past kept colliding with the present. His hands, once rough from hard work, now wore the polish of success. The eyes that used to hold warmth now carried the cold shimmer of pride. And beside him the woman, beautiful, elegant, and everything Tina never could be, smiled like she owned a piece of him Tina once held entirely. It wasn't jealousy. It was grief. Grief for a love that had died without a proper goodbye. As the night carried on, Tina found herself pulled toward his table again. Her steps were slow, deliberate, but inside she was falling apart. The clinking of glassware, the laughter, the smell of luxury. Everything blurred together into one unbearable noise. And then it happened. Samuel turned. Their eyes met again, longer this time, deeper, unguarded. It was as if both of them had stepped out of time and into the truth. His face softened with something between surprise and regret. Hers hardened with something between pain and strength. The air between them became heavy, charged, unspoken. Years of silence screamed in that moment. Years of betrayal, of unanswered questions, of nights spent wondering why. And then, the storm that had been waiting inside her broke free. Her hand rose, slow but certain, driven not by anger but by every ounce of heartbreak she had carried alone. It cut through the glittering air and landed against his face with a sound so sharp, so sudden that it silenced the entire hall. The music stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. The laughter died. Every pair of eyes turned toward them, the billionaire and the waitress. But Tina didn't see any of them. All she saw was the man who had once promised her forever, now standing before her with the emptiest look she had ever seen. The sting of her palm was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. That slap was not violence, it was truth. It was the echo of every night she had cried alone, every dream that had withered while he climbed the ladder of fame. In that single moment, everything she had buried erupted into the open. All the words she had never said were carried in that sound. All the pain she had never allowed herself to feel was released in one motion of trembling defiance. Samuel didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there, the man the world admired, stripped of all his armor. His empire meant nothing now. No applause could save him from the judgment in her eyes. The silence that followed was suffocating, and yet within it there was also clarity. Tina turned and walked away, her heart pounding, her breath unsteady. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. Behind her, the world continued. Whispers rising, cameras flashing, security moving. But all of that belonged to another reality, one she no longer wanted to be part of. In the solitude of the staff corridor, she leaned against the cold wall, her body trembling not from regret but release. For the first time in years, she had faced the ghost that haunted her, and she had not crumbled. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't care. The slap wasn't for revenge. It wasn't to humiliate him. It was to set herself free from the weight of the past, from the lie that she had moved on, from the illusion that she was powerless. But freedom, she realized, doesn't come quietly. It arrives in the wreckage of everything you've held back. Back in the grand hall, Samuel sat frozen, his hand resting against his cheek. Around him, people whispered about the scandal, the audacity, the drama, but he heard none of it. His world had narrowed to one truth. The woman he had left behind had not been erased by time or success. She was still there, stronger than before, and she had just reminded him of who he really was and what he had lost. As the crowd slowly regained its rhythm, Samuel's mind spiraled back to a life he had buried beneath skyscrapers and shareholders. The tiny apartment, the laughter, the warmth, it all came rushing back, flooding him with a kind of pain money couldn't numb. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt small, not because of the slap, but because of what it meant. That night, as the last guests left and the golden lights dimmed, two lives that once ran together now stood on opposite sides of fate. Again, and bound not by love, but by unfinished history. Neither of them knew that the storm had only begun. What seemed like an ending was merely the beginning of redemption, forgiveness, and the long road back to the hearts they had once lost. Because some souls, no matter how far they drift apart, are destined to meet again, not to rekindle what was, but to rediscover what still remains. The night after the storm was quieter than usual, yet the silence carried the weight of everything that had just unfolded. The world outside, the royal crest moved on as if nothing had happened. Traffic still hummed. Laughter still filled the bars, and the city lights still blinked in careless rhythm. But within two hearts, the echoes of that single moment, that single slap, refused to fade. Tina couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the cracks on the ceiling that looked almost like roads leading nowhere. The city noise seeped through her thin walls, but her mind was trapped in another world, one made of memories she had buried long ago. She remembered the man who used to hold her close when the nights were cold, the man who whispered dreams into her hair and made her believe they could conquer the world. She remembered the mornings they shared coffee from the same chipped mug, laughing over nothing. She remembered the little things, his handwriting on a crumpled paper, his tired smile after work, his hand resting on hers when words weren't needed. But she also remembered the emptiness that came after he left. The nights when she would wait for footsteps that never returned. The months she spent pretending she was fine while every heartbeat ached. With the same question, why wasn't love enough? The years that followed had taught her survival, not peace. She had learned how to live with less, how to smile without joy, how to hide pain behind the routines of life. But nothing had prepared her for seeing him again. Not the success, not the distance, not the time. And when she did, all the pain she thought was gone came back sharper than before. She didn't regret what she had done. That slap was never about anger. It was about closure, about reclaiming the voice she lost the day he walked away. But now that the adrenaline had faded, she felt something else, something colder. It wasn't guilt. It was emptiness. The kind that follows when the storm inside you has finally passed and all that's left is the quiet ruin it leaves behind. She sat by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights. Somewhere she imagined he was awake too, and she was right. Across the city, high above in a penthouse where the windows touched the clouds, Samuel Mark sat alone. The glittering skyline that once made him proud now looked hollow, like 1,000 lights with no warmth. The slap still burned faintly on his cheek, but the real wound was deeper, older. It wasn't the touch that hurt, it was the reminder. He had built an empire out of ambition, brick by brick, deal by deal. People saw him as a man who had everything: wealth, power, respect. But they didn't see what he'd lost to gain it. They didn't know that behind the glass walls of his success lived a man haunted by silence. For years he told himself he made the right choice, that leaving her behind was necessary, that love couldn't survive in the world he wanted to conquer. He had convinced himself that wealth could fill the void, that luxury could quiet the guilt. But tonight that illusion crumbled. When he saw her face again, tired, strong, real, it was like looking at everything he had buried under his empire. The laughter they shared, the promises they made, the love they once called home, all of it came flooding back. And for the first time in a decade, Samuel felt small again, human again. He walked through the silent halls of his home, past art he didn't care about, furniture he never used, rooms that had never known love. He poured himself a drink, but it didn't taste like victory anymore. The glass felt heavy in his hand. He stared at his reflection, a man dressed in success but starved of meaning. He remembered the way she used to look at him. Not like the world owed him something, but like he was enough even when he had nothing. And now, as the rain hit the windows, he realized that he had traded the one person who believed in his soul for a world that only believed in his name. Regret is a cruel companion. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It reminds you quietly of everything you could have been. Samuel sat down, his mind replaying the moment she struck him, not as humiliation, but as truth. The power in that moment wasn't in her hand, but in her heart. She had faced the man who abandoned her and stood tall. And he had never looked smaller. He thought about reaching out, about finding her, about saying all the words that never left his tongue. But what could he possibly say? That he was sorry? That he missed her? Words were too small for a decade of silence. So he stayed awake, watching the dawn creep over the city. The first light of morning touched the skyline, golden, cold, and distant. It reminded him of her, bright, resilient, untouchable. Meanwhile, in her little apartment miles away, Tina felt the same sunrise warming her face through the thin curtains. She didn't know he was awake too. She didn't know that the man she had loved and lost was thinking about her with the same ache that had lived inside her for years. Two hearts, once one, now separated by miles of city, wealth and choices beat quietly in the same rhythm of regret. Fate had drawn them into the same night again for a reason. It wasn't finished with them. The universe rarely brings people back together by accident. Sometimes it happens to test the heart, sometimes to heal it, and sometimes to give it one final chance to rewrite what was lost. Neither of them knew it yet, but the next time they met would not be by chance. It would be the moment that decided whether love could survive the damage of time, or whether some stories, no matter how deep, were only meant to end where they began. As the sun rose higher, two lives began a new day, unaware that destiny was already at work, quietly stitching the torn pages of their story back together. Because love, no matter how broken, never truly dies. It hides in silence, waiting for the right moment to breathe again. Days passed, yet the world around Tina moved as if nothing had changed. Guests came and went, laughter filled the golden halls of the royal crest, and life carried on for everyone, except for her. Every tray she carried, every smile she forced, every polite word she spoke was weighed down by a single thought. Him. Samuel Mark. The man who had once been her everything, now the ghost that haunted every quiet moment. She tried to tell herself she had moved on, that the slap had released her from the chains of the past, that the life she had built in her own resilience was enough. But no matter how many times she repeated it, the memory of his eyes, that flash of shock, recognition, and something deeper, lingered like a storm cloud that refused to pass. Meanwhile, Samuel Mark's empire continued to rise above the city skyline, but its heights brought no satisfaction. He signed contracts, closed deals, and smiled in public, but inside, the emptiness persisted. Every victory was hollow because the one person he had truly loved remained outside. His reach, untouchable. He had thought success could bury regret, but it had only made it sharper, more insistent. And so he made a decision, not to flaunt his wealth, not to coerce forgiveness, not to impress her with what he had become, but simply to see her again. To witness the woman who had survived, who had endured, who had faced him with all the courage he no longer possessed. Their second encounter was not in the grand hall. It was quiet, understated, designed not for spectacle but for truth. He had arranged a meeting under the guise of a simple apology, a gesture of recognition for what she had endured. He did not summon her to his world of gold and chandeliers. Instead, he met her in a modest cafe, neutral ground, small enough for honesty, empty enough for reflection. Tina arrived, hesitant, wary. She had no illusions about the man before her. She knew the wealth, the charm, the power. All of it was a shield he had built to protect himself from the consequences of his choices. Their next meeting was neither grand nor orchestrated. It didn't require chandeliers, applause, or a stage. It happened in a quiet park under the gentle warmth of the autumn sun, where leaves swirled around their feet like memories were finally set free. Tina arrived first, sitting on a simple bench, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, eyes distant but alert. She felt the air shift before he appeared. A familiar presence, no longer imposing, but familiar in a way that is called to something buried deep in her heart. Samuel approached slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to frighten the fragile balance they had begun to rebuild. Every step carried weight, humility, and reverence. When he reached her, he did not speak at first. He simply stood looking at her, drinking in the years the strength and the resilience that time had carved into her. Tina looked up, meeting his gaze. In that single instant, everything collapsed and reformed. The hurt, the longing, the memories, and the hope. They didn't need words. Nothing needed to be said. They had both changed, yet both remained the same at the core. The two people who had once dreamed together in a tiny apartment now faced each other, in a world vastly different, yet intimately familiar. Time seemed to pause. The city around them faded, leaving only the warmth of the sun, the whisper of leaves, and the quiet heartbeat of two souls seeking reconciliation. Samuel knelt slightly, not in submission, but in recognition of the love he had lost and now wished to honor. He did not demand forgiveness. He did not expect it. He simply offered himself, unguarded, open, and willing. Tina's eyes glistened. She felt the years of grief, anger, and isolation fall away in small, imperceptible pieces. The woman who had been broken but survived was finally ready to acknowledge the man who had been lost but never forgotten. Slowly, she reached out, not with hesitation, but with courage, bridging the distance that had stretched across decades of absence. When their hands met, it was more than a touch. It was a testament to resilience, to enduring love, and to the power of truth. It was the recognition that some bonds cannot be broken by time, distance, or mistakes. They could be bent, frayed, tested, but never truly severed.